Liturgical Drama and the Rebirth of Theatre. State Standard, HS1.T.C&1.A, investigate how cultural perspectives, community ideas, and personal beliefs impact a theatrical work, and HS1.T.C&1.B, explore how cultural, global, and historic belief systems affect creative choices in a theatrical work. During the medieval period, church services were delivered entirely in Latin, no matter where in Europe a congregation happened to be. Can you imagine what problems the Catholic priests must have faced when they were preaching in Latin to serfs in, for example, Germany or Scotland or France? Catholic priests faced a problem. They wanted people to submit to biblical teachings, but Rome had decreed that church services could only be performed in Latin. Most of their parishioners had no education and could not understand Latin. For 400 years, this was a huge problem, until the year 975 AD, when someone, we don't know who, came up with the idea to act out Bible stories as part of the church service so that people could understand what was happening because they would have a visual aid, even though they couldn't understand the language being spoken. This means that theater was reborn inside the very institution that shut it down in the first place. The first of these Catholic short plays that we have on record, we don't know for a fact that this is the very first one ever. This is just the first one that anybody bothered to write about in a history book, is called Quam Quaeritus. Translated from Latin, it means, "Whom do you seek?" This was a reenactment of the resurrection of Christ and was performed at an Easter Mass. If you don't know much about Christianity, one of the major tenets of the religion is the fact that the Messiah figure, Jesus Christ, was crucified, but then 3 days later rose from the dead. It's a very, very important part of Christian religion, is this belief. And this story is told annually every year at a holiday called Easter. In this particular performance, a group of priests dressed up as the three Marys: Mary, the mother of Christ, Mary the Magdalene, and Mary, the sister of Lazarus, as well as 2 guards and an angel. They built a simple set that represented an empty tomb. If you're unfamiliar, this is an iconic moment in Christian mythology, when the Marys go to the tomb of Jesus, expecting to consecrate it with oils, etc. And instead of seeing the tomb sealed up, they see that the stone has been moved away from the entrance to the tomb, that the 2 Roman guards who were placed out front are passed out, and that there is an angel present there to explain to them that Christ had in fact risen from the dead as he said he would do. So in this performance, the 3 Marys, priests in costume, enter the scene expecting to find the tomb sealed up, but the guards are knocked out cold, and an angel is sitting on the empty tomb. And the angel says, in Latin, "Whom do you seek in the tomb, O Christians? Jesus of Nazareth, the crucified, the heavenly being, he is not here. He is risen, as foretold. Go and announce that he is risen from the tomb." That's the entire script. It's 4 lines. And to us, in the 21st century, this is a nothing performance. This probably wouldn't even be good enough to do at churches today because it's so short and there's so very little to it. But at the time, considering that there was almost no other entertainment available, and even what was available wasn't often consumed because people were consumed with work, this was revolutionary. People absolutely loved it. Word spread, and soon churches all across Europe began writing plays about stories from the Bible to include in their services. This kind of theater became known as liturgical drama. A liturgical drama is a play with a religious message, and often we see this related to Christianity. However, this concept applies regardless of religion. If, for example, you were to attend a Shinto service in Japan and there was a play about the Shinto religion, that would be considered a liturgical drama, even though it's not about Christianity. A liturgical drama is any play with a religious message. Related to the medieval period in Europe, however, there are 4 types of liturgical drama that you need to know about. The first of these 4 types is called a mystery play. Take Scooby-Doo out of your head. When I say mystery, it doesn't have anything to do with solving crime. Rather, the term mystery play refers to the expression God works in mysterious ways. Mystery plays are Bible stories. In other words, they are depictions of the mysterious workings of God as they are represented in the Bible. The second type of liturgical drama is called a miracle play. A miracle play is about the life of one of the saints. Often, people were sainted in the Catholic canon after they were either performing miracles or they were martyred for their faith. So this term miracle play refers to the lives of the saints. Then you have morality plays. Morality plays don't necessarily represent any particular Bible story, and they aren't about any actual saints. In fact, sometimes morality plays are entirely fiction. What they have in common is that they are about a regular person's struggle to overcome evil and live a good Christian life. So despite the fact that they are not Bible stories, nor are they about the lives of the saints, they still teach a Christian lesson. And finally, we have passion plays. We've had the term passion play before. A passion play is a depiction of a scene from the life of a deity in a particular religion. Specific to Christianity, a passion play is any play that depicts a scene from the life of Christ. For example, if you have ever been to a church that did a Christmas pageant where you saw baby Jesus in the manger, you have seen a passion play. If you have ever seen a depiction of the crucifixion or the resurrection of Christ, you have seen a passion play. If you have seen the movie The Passion of the Christ, you have seen a passion play. That's where that name comes from. All of these 4 types are designed to reinforce Christian doctrine, and it was an effective way to spread the teachings of the church in a way that people actually wanted to listen to. Remember, just because pagan religion was against the law during this time period doesn't mean that people weren't still practicing pagan religions in secret. And pagan religions at the time were a lot more appealing to people than the Christian church, which was viewed, remember, at the time, it was viewed more as a legal than a religious institution. But once the church was able to incorporate this performative element, this element of entertainment, all of a sudden, people were excited about embracing Christianity. Over time, liturgical dramas inside the church became so popular that people were coming from all over and packing churches anytime they knew there was going to be a liturgical drama performed. But this becomes a problem for the church. What happens when you get a large group of uneducated people together? They start arguing. They start fighting. So what's happening is you have these large groups of people coming to church and then brawls are breaking out. Very un-Christian-like behavior begins to take place. So the church was forced to relinquish the control of these plays, and they enlisted the help of various local guilds. A guild was a group of men who worked in the same trade. Yes, men and only men, because women really didn't work outside the home. Women in trade existed, but they were very rare and often wouldn't be accepted into guilds when they were employed in a trade. So guilds were groups of men who worked in the same trade. The guilds collaborated with the church to divide certain liturgical dramas among them. Guilds would be responsible then for learning all of the lines and for performing these plays. In some places, the guilds divided up the available liturgical dramas based on themes that were relevant to the kind of work that they did, so that these liturgical dramas began to double as advertising for the kinds of work that they did. For example, the Bakers' Guild might perform the liturgical drama about the Last Supper because it's food-related, because they had a surplus of food items that they could use in their play, and because after the performance, they could advertise their wares. The shipwrights, W-R-I-G-H-T, is a suffix that refers to a maker of. So a shipwright is someone who makes boats or ships. A cartwright is someone who makes carts, etc., etc. The Shipwrights Guild would have performed the liturgical drama about Noah's Ark, because they had boats available to them to use as scenery, and also it gave them an opportunity to advertise their work. By the year 1350, most plays were being performed outside the walls of the church, although almost all of them had a liturgical influence, a strong Christian message. In fact, not only were plays performed mostly outside the walls of the church, they were performed mostly outdoors, period. Because it was a guild production as opposed to a church production, guilds were able to perform these plays in the language of their communities as opposed to Latin as was dictated by the papacy in Rome, which means not only were people being entertained, they were now being educated about the Bible in their own language. As we mentioned, these plays were being performed outdoors. Rather than having people travel to a church or a playhouse, the guilds took their shows on the road. They traveled their plays to wherever people could easily gather. This gave rise to the invention of the pageant wagon. Today, we call this a parade float. The original pageant wagon was a 12-foot by 12-foot stage on wheels. Every guild play had at least 3 of these. This was a convention of liturgical drama in the medieval period. The first wagon would have a representation of heaven. In the center would be your earth scene. The actual play would take place on the center wagon. The last wagon would be a depiction of hell. Sometimes, if you had multiple locations in your play, you would have multiple wagons in the center. But you always had, at first, your depiction of heaven, and the last thing the audience would see is a depiction of hell. And the way they worked is people would stand in the middle of the town square, and the wagons would roll into place. The play would be performed, and then the wagons would move around to the other side of the green or the town square or wherever they happened to be, so that the next group of people could see the play up close. Once they had completed that second performance of the play, they would move again and keep rotating around the people until everyone had been able to see the play. It's during this period that we see the emergence of some specific jobs in the theater that we hadn't had before. We still have these jobs today, but they have changed name. The first was the keeper of the register. As I mentioned in our last lecture, most people during this period were not educated. They could not read and write. The only education they had was related to the trade that they worked in. So for these guild plays, you needed one person who could read. They would be in charge of the script. And because they were the one guy that could read and they were in charge of the script, they got to tell everybody what to say, where to stand, and how to perform their part. This was the keeper of the register in the Middle Ages. Today, we call the person who is in charge of the script and who gets to tell everybody else what to do the director. It is my favorite job in the theater. The other job that emerges during this period was called the Master of Secrets. And if that is not the coolest name that has ever been invented for a job ever, I don't know what is. We still have this job today. The Master of Secrets was the person who would design and build scenery and special effects, which could be quite elaborate. Pageant wagons were able to incorporate flying effects for scenes like angels descending from heaven or Elijah being flown up to heaven in his fiery chariot. They also were able to do pyrotechnic effects, like setting the hell wagon on fire without killing anybody or destroying all of their scenery. But because people are naturally competitive, guilds didn't want their competitors to know how they did their special effects. And that's where the name Master of Secrets comes from. They built all of the scenery and the special effects, and they kept it secret from other guilds. Today, we call this job the technical director. As I mentioned, pageant wagons had special effects. Some favorites among audiences were trapdoors. These could be used for demons climbing up out of the fiery pits of hell, or for making actors seem to disappear. For example, if you're going to do a story about Sodom and Gomorrah and Lot's wife who turns to salt when she turns back to look as they're leaving, what you would do is you would have the actor stand over the trap door, and when it was time for him to turn into salt, he would drop down into the trap door and seem to disappear before the audience's very eyes. You also had flying effects, using a pulley system for angels and Elijah's chariot and Jesus ascending into heaven, and pyrotechnics for your hellfire. The guilds and their pageant wagons helped to spread the gospel, which put them in the good graces of the church. But they also fostered an interest in education. The Emperor Charlemagne had built schools all over Europe during the Middle Ages, but people still had to work all the time to make their living, so the literacy rate remained pretty low despite access to schools for most people. Meaning there likely was a school in your community that you could choose to send your children to, but you didn't much see the point in it. Pageant wagons, however, made people want to learn how to read so that they could read the Bible for themselves. Imagine, for example, that you have a guild bringing the story of Noah's Ark into your town. And in this play, the guild has a line about how it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. A few weeks later, another guild comes into town bringing the same play, but they say that Noah and his family were on the ark for 150 days and nights. Which one was accurate? If you could read the Bible, you could find out for yourself. In this way, pageant wagons made people get interested in getting educated. But that had an unintended consequence. You see, the more education people in a community have, the more likely there's going to be social change. When people are uneducated, they are often unaware of the problems facing their communities. Education tends to open our eyes. The more educated people are, the more social change occurs within that community. As pageant wagon plays grew in popularity, and this interest in education grew right alongside it, the feudal system began to disappear in the later 1300s. Due to a number of factors, but a more educated population certainly was a contributing factor. An increase in education led to more people questioning the church itself as well, and disagreeing with some of its teachings. One such individual, Martin Luther, sparked a revolution in 1517 when he nailed his 95 Theses to a church door in Germany, directly challenging the authority of the Catholic Church. This sparked an event called the Protestant Reformation, which caused people all over Europe to reject the authority of the Catholic Church and to create several Protestant denominations. The word Protestant has the root protest. So a Protestant was someone who protested the authority of the papacy in Rome, or the Pope in the Catholic Church. Unfortunately, this also created a lot of unrest among neighbors who remained Catholic and those who did not, and this trouble will lead to one of the greatest plays of all time. But we'll get to that later.